Awesome. Maybe we'll get started with some introductions before we get into the fireside chat. So just for everybody who's out there watching, what we're going to do tonight is have a fireside chat developer life session Q&A. So what we want to do here today is give you the opportunity to hear from some of our real life developers at Shopify and in the Dev Degree program, to hear about what they do on a day-to-day basis, how they got into computer science, why they got into computer science, sometimes an interesting question, and kind of what their career has been at this point. So we have some awesome folks here with a lot of different perspectives. So it should be interesting to get to know them. So for the first 20 minutes, we'll get to know everybody. Maybe we'll have everybody say like who you are, generally what you do, maybe where you are, what temperature it is outside, what your role is at Shopify, and then like the elevator pitch of who you are. So like, what do you do? What would your day-to-day be like? What are you dealing with within Shopify? Just so that everybody has an idea of who we're talking to. And then for those of you watching at home, for the last 30-ish minutes, we will be answering your questions. So I've been collecting questions from a Google form leading up to the event that we'll use as our primary source of questions. And if you have other questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll see what we can do to get into all of them. We don't often get to everyone's question, but we will do our best to answer as broadly as we can so that we all have some of our questions answered. In terms of the questions, tonight we're going to be talking about what life is like as a developer, what your career path could look like, where you would be going. So if you do have questions about the Dev Degree program specifically, the application cycle, things like that, please go to the Dev Degree website. You can find some contact information there and send your questions there. I'm going to be focusing on questions around developer life. So if you are seeing those in the chat and I am ignoring them, I know that I'm doing them on purpose. Okay, so maybe let's start with my wonderful co-host, Derek, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Ledoux. I've been at Shopify now for a little over 4 years, and I'm lead instructor on the Dev Degree team. So our Dev Degree program is where we take in our interns, we train them up for multiple years, and your first year of that program is spent with us in our classroom, learning different courses, going through different material, training you up for your first placement. So I've been here since the second cohort of students in Dev Degree. I've had the pleasure of teaching probably over 100 kids now at this point. It's been an amazing experience, my favorite job I've ever had. My past experience is also in teaching and education. I used to be a college professor, and this is the best place to teach. So that's basically my 2 cents there. Should I popcorn it over to somebody?
Yeah, let's do popcorn.
Sure. How about Ashwin?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashfin. I'm a third-year Carleton University student, and in terms of my role at Shopify, I'm a Dev Degree intern on the Revenue R&D Flex team as a full-stack developer. Within this team, I get the opportunity to build custom features for Shopify Plus merchants, and in addition to this, I also get to do a lot of flexible project work across areas of Shopify. So I really enjoy that. My kind of foray into this was like growing up. I both my parents were software engineers, so I was naturally into tech all my life. But I really enjoyed tech. I really got into like HTML, CSS, and front end development, and that's kind of a place which I had like a good soft spot for. And that was kind of I realized so many opportunities that you could do with it, and that's why I applied to Shopify, and I get to work with the best technologies and tools here. I'll pop it over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwin. I'm Eric, obviously. I am a second-year student, so I'm on my first placement. I am on the Shopify Fulfillment Network team. So what that does is helping merchants fulfill their items from our own warehouses. So that's a pretty cool experience. Kind of how I got into computer science, kind of like Ashwin, my parents are in the tech field as well. I've also really always just enjoyed problem solving and kind of figuring stuff out, and kind of computer science is the perfect kind of career to allow you to problem solve and think and stuff like that. So I always just kind of enjoyed it. So I guess that's how how I ended up here. I'll pass it off to Britta.
Yeah, so my name's Britta. I am a mobile developer at Shopify, specifically on a point of sale team, building for both Android and iOS with React Native, for those of you who are interested. And I actually am one of the original dev degree students. So I was in the first cohort. Yeah. And we graduated in 2020, and I've been full-time at Shopify ever since. Actually, everyone who graduated at that time, and I'm not sure after that, but we all have been at Shopify ever since. So we love it here. So how I got into computer science is so different. I actually did my first degree in visual arts. And so I worked in that field, doing like artwork, working in an artist run center, focusing more on that. Got really into technology that way. Got headhunted for a job in marketing. So ended up working in a software company as a marketing coordinator, which I thought would be my career goal and everything. And realized really quickly that I didn't want to do B2B marketing, which is business to business marketing. And I really wanted to do what the developers were doing and solving those types of problems. And so I ended up applying for Carleton, getting into school, and then later on joining Shopify new dev degree program. And so I took a very different path than most people did. But obviously that means that you have different assets in play as well. So I get to do some fun stuff with designers and stuff all the time. And yeah, I think I answered everything, right?
You did. I just learned something already. That was
cool. Thanks. And I guess I'll popcorn it over to Tyler.
Hey, sorry. My name's Tyler. I've been at Shopify for about 5.5 years now. I actually started in support with Shopify, so I also had a bit of a weird path through the developer world. I was always interested in programming when I was younger. I made little websites and things like that. And I had registered for computer engineering, and I went to the first day of classes, and there was a semiconductors course, and I was like, this is not for me. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I promptly switched into mechanical engineering the next day. And mechanical engineering had just as many semiconductor courses. So it was a terrible decision. But I worked oil and gas for about a year in Louisiana after I graduated, and I knew it wasn't for me. I joined Shopify. Basically, I was just looking for any way to get back to Canada and go back to school. I was kind of considering trying other degrees like med school. I wrote the MCAT at one point and all these sorts of things. And while I was working at Shopify, I started learning a little bit more how to be a developer. And so I spent about a year in support helping merchants customize their themes, making buttons greener and brighter and bigger and anything to make people press buy, basically, which was a lot of fun. And I eventually worked my way into a developer job, and I've been doing that for close to 4 years now. And I currently work on the media team at Shopify. So it's everything to do with how merchants upload images, video, 3D models to the platform, and how kind of they can be viewed in the space of the world now, which is kind of cool. And it's a really neat area we're working into now.
Awesome. Super cool. I can't wait to hear about all of this. Thank you, everybody. I always do this. I realize I just make everybody else talk about themselves, and I don't introduce myself going into these sessions. So I am Tristan. I am the recruiter for the Dev Degree program. So I work with everybody here in the Dev Degree program as well to facilitate the admissions process, bring these types of events to everyone, and then ultimately interview people and bring them into the program. And that, I won't talk too much about myself because I'm not a developer, and that's not the title of this evening. Okay, so why don't we get started into everything? So I have a couple of questions here from our inbox. If people have some questions that are coming up as our panelists are talking and you want to throw them in the chat, feel free to do that. So we've got Tyler, developer from support, Britta, former Dev Degree student, always Dev Degree in her heart, developer, and Ashfin and Eric are current Dev Degree interns, as well as Derek, technical educator, senior technical educator in the Dev Degree program. Okay, so my first question, this one is for, I'm going to send this to Tyler and Britta. This is something that I was wondering when I started at Shopify, because I really didn't know what developers did. But can you tell us a little bit about like what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like what is the work that you are doing when you are developing?
I
wanna start?
guess I'll start. I go first. Is that how that works? Yeah, for me, it kind of varies a lot, actually. It depends on like the stage of a project we're in. So at Shopify, we kind of have this like think, build, explore. These are the 3 different stages of our projects. So really early on in like the think stage, it's kind of actually a lot of collaborating with other developers, but also designers and researchers and product managers, and even merchants sometimes. So we reach out to merchants and we talk to them about features that we're thinking about implementing and kind of the things they might need in those features. And once we kind of work through that area, then we move into this like explore where we actually start building prototypes and seeing, hey, how could this fit into our code base, and does it work, and where does it break, and what things blow up when we do this, and things always blow up. So it's quite a fun like stage to be in. And then after that, we move into like the actual building of the product. And this is where we mostly work with the other developers at that point, and we're kind of writing bits of code, bits of the feature, and we deploy pretty quickly at Shopify. So we're constantly like developing, shipping the code, and we're reviewing each other's code as it goes out and testing it and making sure it works. And then bugs always eventually come in, and we find the bugs and we solve the bugs as well. Not all of them all the time, but sometimes. I don't know, Britta, what else do you have in?
Yeah, I basically feel like every day I'm reviewing code. I'm writing a little bit of code. I'm usually attending a virtual meeting or two. Sometimes it's just a stand-up, which is just basically a meeting where we tell each other, like our team will tell each other basically what we're working on so that everyone's up to date, especially when we're all virtual. Like it's a little bit easier to do that. And then what else? Sometimes I pair program, which basically means that I get to program where basically 2 of us are controlling one keyboard and one mouse on the same time, and we're programming together. What else? There's like, yeah, it's usually less writing code and more talking about writing code or talking about how to implement certain pieces of code. And yeah, so hopefully, I think it's a good explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great context for what you do. I have the same question, and maybe we can speak a little bit about the training path as well for Ashwin and Eric. As a dev degree intern, what does your day-to-day look like when it comes to the work that you're doing? This time I will start with Ashwin, maybe.
Yeah, so usually I try to spend about I might work on some tasks for like the morning or afternoon. I usually have heads down time, and I usually have like a team stand up, taking on some tasks and pair programming sessions with my mentor and lead.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, am I cutting you off? I don't want to cut you off.
All
I think
good.
I had a little bit of an issue there. Okay, what about you, Eric?
Yeah, so kind of day to day, what I do is like kind of differs every day because we're part-time, so we're at school some days. So some days I might be working all day, some days I might have Carleton, and like I go to Carleton, so I have school in the morning and work in the afternoon. A lot of the time I review code like everyone else, but and I find reviewing code to be very kind of useful to learn. You kind of learn from the much more experienced developers, see how they did it and see how they're criticizing each other. Do a lot of work as well on actual code and thinking and stuff. To touch on the training path as well, since I got off the training path, I guess earlier this year. Earlier this year. The training path, you kind of it's 8 months long. It's with the wonderful bearded man over there. That kind of is one of your instructors, and you basically learn all these different tech stacks. So you learn Ruby, you learn React, GraphQL, everything you need to kind of get hands-on and kind of be able to kind of function as a developer in the big wide world of Shopify. They teach you that on the training path. So your day-to-day is kind of going through some learning modules on a certain thing, and then doing some practice, maybe getting on a call with Derek for a further lesson, doing some pair programming and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of what dev degree intern does on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome.
You nailed that.
Thanks, Eric.
It's like you remember it.
It's like you were there. Maybe to follow up with Britta or Eric, can you explain a little bit about what paired programming is and what you mean by that term? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, Britta, but just kind of how that plays into the work.
Well, there's a few different ways you can do pair programming, and the intention might be different depending on what you're working on. Sometimes it can be used as a teaching tool. So the idea is that you're looking at the same screen. So virtually, we do it by using a specific piece of software that allows us to be looking at the same screen at the same time and to be controlling the one mouse and the one keyboard at the same time. So we're able to kind of learn from each other by having two people looking at it. If it's like you're learning, you're like wanting to learn from someone who has more experience. Sometimes you're at the same level and you're just basically trying to put two heads together and spot certain things. Usually someone's better at spotting certain types of errors than the other one. And sometimes when you're typing code, you could be not really paying attention to spelling and the other person catches it right away. And so it's just a faster way sometimes to program because you've got two heads looking at it. And so the reviews are going to hopefully go by a little faster later on because you've got more eyes on it at the beginning of the process rather than at the end. But yeah, I've used it all the time too for learning and from learning from people who are higher levels than I am and who want to teach some of those skills to me. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. I hear about it all the time and I have a general sense of what it is, but it seems like a very powerful tool that I would like to shadow a shadowing session like that.
If I could jump in real quick, one of the super cool things also about pairing and pair programming, like we lean into this very, very much at Shopify, and it's a two-way street. So if you're a senior dev and you're pairing with a non-senior dev, you're distilling that information down, you're leveling them up. But the reverse and the flip is also happening where you are bringing somebody up as a senior dev and you're sort of like plussing your skills in people leadership as well too, right? So there's like it's like a give and a take relationship in both directions and everybody benefits. And there's like this weird thought behind like, isn't it weird to just put double the time into a task? But at the end of the day, the benefits is like the code is tighter and the people that were part of that pairing programming are coming out better, both of them. So it's just like everybody wins around. It's awesome.
Also, you do look at like, even if you're a more junior dev, you look at the code differently than that senior dev would. And so you'll catch other things and stuff too. So it's not so much about like I see it as like, I like to pair to learn more about the skill because that's where I'm at with my career, but I learn lots from, or they learn lots from me too, is what I mean to say.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Derek. This is kind of another question that's in a similar vein. And maybe anybody who has kind of a thought or an experience with this can answer. What is the difference between a self-taught developer and a developer with a computer science degree? And in the context of the company is the question. So for the company, is there a difference? And if there is, what would it be? This is an interesting one.
I think this is like, this comes up a lot. Like, so like I work with people who only finished their high school degree and then they went right into developing. I work with people who have like PhDs and, you know, they have tons and tons of skills. And like, I think through like, I want the magic of Shopify or like the way we like pair program and we work off each other. And it's like, it's not a competitive environment. Like everyone is literally just here to help each other grow. So someone who's like out of high school and completely self-taught are usually very scrappy people and they know how to solve a problem and research and figure things out and learn. And those are skills that someone who has like a PhD doesn't necessarily have because they have been taught. So it's like this really cool environment where people are learning different skills from each other and like pushing everyone up to the next level. So I think it doesn't really matter what your background is because everyone comes in with different skills that they can bring to the table.
I think it's more about your learning style than like how you're seen it. Because I feel like you're not looked down on at the company. Like no one asks you what at least my coworkers, I have no idea who finished what level of education. And it really comes down to like how well you're succeeding and what your learning style is to get into that level. I don't know. I needed a degree because that's my learning style, and I recognize that. But like, I know that that's not true for everybody. So
important to be self-aware.
yeah.
Any thoughts on this from your perspectives, Ashwin or Eric?
Yeah, so my old lead and my current mentor both didn't take a computer science degree. They're both self-taught. Just like Tyler, my mentor, he started out as a support advisor, taught himself, and now he's like a senior dev. And same with my lead. I think he took some random design degree or something like that. And you see it everywhere. You see people with no degree, completely random degrees, everything. And that's one of the beauties of computer science. It's not so much about having a degree. It's about how good are you at kind of solving problems and teaching yourself and guiding yourself through it. And that's why here at Shopify, we have such a diverse group of people. And to kind of like double down on that, you don't have to even be a student to apply for a Shopify internship. You could just be any random person. You can apply for a Shopify internship and you can get it. So it's very diverse.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Eric. For Shopify, for any of the roles, there's no education requirement for internships, dev degree, or developer roles. I think kind of being in that environment, coming out of school or in school, it feels like you need to have the degree, or if I want to make a transition in my career, then I'm going to need to get a degree. And a lot of companies do have that as a requirement when you're applying for something. But I think especially in the case of computer science, that's just an easier thing for them to do, because somebody who has a degree is very likely going to have the skills that they're looking for. Not necessarily in a lot of cases. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you're well educated. But especially in Shopify's case, it's not about the degree. It's what you can do. And it doesn't matter where you develop those skills. Yeah. Okay. One other question kind of in this vein. So I'd like to have some from our full-time folks, from the interns, as well as from you, Derek, on this one. What is the most important thing to learn in the beginning?
I could go first. The very first thing, the most important thing to learn and to do right away, I'm probably going to steal this from everybody as soon as I say it, is to fail immediately and to be cool with that, basically, right? And this kind of goes back to like the last question too about school. The cool thing about school is it gives you this place to fail, and it forces you to learn from those mistakes, as opposed to teaching yourself in a vacuum. You fail, you have to force yourself to learn from that mistake. School forces you to learn from it. That's the whole point of school. So it also goes back to how you learn and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, the number one thing is just to learn how to fail and how to learn something from that failure, not to get stuck in it, but to pull something out of it and then be like, cool, that sucked. That didn't go great. Life moves on. What's the next thing I could fail at? As long as I'm pulling something out of it, right? Then you'll constantly be learning, and those fails will happen less and less. And the other thing you'll notice is all the other people around you that are also constantly failing at everything else that they do and learning from it and pulling things from it, right? Nobody is that. The idea of like the rock star doesn't really exist. Everyone's just failing and doing it gracefully, basically. So that's my big takeaway.
I actually had a similar one. So
that doesn't just apply for computer science. Sorry, Brenda. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. It is true though, and I think that the first thing that I like really resonated with me when I first started Shopify like 5.5 years ago was the discussion about growth mindset instead of like a fixed mindset. And that actually set me up really well for the program, because the concept, if you're not familiar with growth mindset, the concept is that you're not just born with a set of skills. So it's not like, oh, I'm not good at math. I never want to do anything in math. I'm not good at math. I'm just point blank, just not good at it. The idea is that you put yet behind any sentence, because you can practice with an infinite amount of time and resources. You can be good at everything is basically what growth mindset is. And so as long as you're setting aside time for it and working towards it, you can be good at math. Despite, I don't know, I have a math minor, so math is not a good example for me, but like being okay and just knowing that, oh, I'm not really comfortable in this. I don't feel like I'm doing well in it, but I know I can do better. That is something I can do. And being aware of that is super important for starting. And again, that is something that also isn't just computer science related. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Britta.
Yeah, I feel like it's like along the exact same thing, and it's like embracing the chaos and embracing the fact that like you are gonna fail is just like everyone. If you like for anyone who's worked at Shopify and any tech company, everyone has broke that tech stack at some point. Like my first month of working at Shopify, I like blocked the ability to make products for a few minutes, and it was like, this is the most important thing. So like, you know, these things happen, and being in an environment where you learn from that failure and like people are there to help you is like the most rewarding thing. I think there was a story earlier this year of like someone breaking AWS or Netflix or something, wasn't there? It was like an intern, and it just turned out really well as this like really great learning experience for them. So it happens, everyone breaks things, and it's embracing that chaos and being like, okay, well, yeah, I broke it, but hey, now I've learned not to do that again.
Yeah, +1 to what Tyler said. Like here, like on all of my team, on the teams that I've been a part of, I feel like the culture here at Shopify, there's like a zero blame game, and it's more like, hey, like how do we figure this out? Like what's the next step that we have to do? And it's really awesome. Like for me, one thing that I really knew I wish I knew at the beginning was like, it's okay to get help and get like knowing when to get help. I think that's super, super important. For me, I struggled with that a little bit earlier on. I would spend a lot of time on a problem, and you know, as I continue to grow, I was able to like kind of figure out like, okay, this is kind of an area where like this is where I'm stuck. This is where I need to get help from, and just collaborate with so many people, and you're able to figure out like you're able to help each other out, and you're able to help solve each other's problems.
And I think to kind of add on to that, like with computer science, really the best way to learn is just go get shit done. Find something that's a problem or an issue or something you just want to do and go do it. And you'll hit issues along the way, but each one of those issues you'll learn from. And you just go on Stack Overflow or something, you find the result and you're like, oh, okay, I can do that. So that's one of the really good things about computer science is you constantly learn. No matter what you're doing, you're always learning and you're always growing just by doing. So if you just want to start, then go find something you want to do, anything, and just start programming it.
I love it. Super inspiring. We all, no matter who you are, we all Google our problems and find answers on the internet. Okay, Derek, have you had your eye on the chats? Is there any interesting questions coming in there?
Yeah, we got lots of great questions. So we're focusing on some developer life questions here today. And this is a good little general computer science question because we got some programmers in the room here. I missed the name. I probably should have copied that, but here we go. I started learning Python on my own, and sometimes I feel like I'm progressing. Other times I feel as though I've plateaued in my learning or even regressed. Have you ever hit a wall in your programming abilities before? If so, how do you tackle that challenge?
Welcome to being a developer.
Question.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Does anybody want to take that specifically?
I was gonna say, this actually touches a little bit on what Ashfin was saying, where it's just like understanding when to actually seek help or get new set of eyes on it. Maybe pair program if you know someone who knows Python. At the beginning, I know that was something that I didn't do enough of. And so it's nice to see that that's really built into the process of Dev Degree, where you are supposed to like ask questions and help and receive the help. When you're learning on your own, sometimes that is a challenge, is that you're looking through forums to get answers and stuff. But it's definitely something that it's normal, like absolutely normal to feel like you're stuck on a problem. And that's when you go, okay, I've time boxed this. That's a good one too. Just a time box the amount of time you're going to work on that specific issue. And if you can't do it in that time, ask for help. Even L9s ask for help. Right. So L9 is a level, it's like the principal engineer. It's like our top level of engineer at Shopify. So I've even asked questions to them and they've gone and asked questions to other people. So it's normal for any level of developer or engineer to ask. Have I answered every part of that question? I'm sorry. It was a longer question.
No one person knows all things, right? And the larger, particularly that goes for larger companies that where we barely even understand everything that our company does, let alone all the code that we put out, right? Like no one person knows all this. It's the collective of all of our brains and all of our minds coming together that actually makes this happen, right?
I think that's actually one of the cool things about dev degree is that, so once people come into dev degree, after like your first year of doing training path, you actually get put on different teams at Shopify. So like I had a dev degree student last year who had been on a security rotation. I know nothing about security, and I was going to them every other day to be like, is this okay? Like, am I breaking something here? And they're the ones who are answering these questions for me. So especially like in that dev degree role, you get to see so many different areas of Shopify. Sometimes you actually become like the expert on your team in that thing because no one else has been there.
That's very true.
It's a very odd thing to come to terms with, that kind of everybody doesn't know what they're doing, and we're all working together to figure that out.
I got a couple more good questions here.
Yeah, let's do it.
This one goes out to some of our interns and former interns in the room, probably more of our current interns. Are you working remote right now? Yes. But more importantly, let's talk about like how we're managing that in terms of that plus your classes. How do you actually, what does your day look like? How have you figured out how to do this remotely? Either Eric or Ashwin, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go for Eric.
I personally enjoy being remote. The commute is just terrible. I just don't want to wake up like 2 hours earlier and have to drive downtown, like go to the office, go to Carleton, stuff like that. I'm a fan of remote, and I'm a strong believer that computer science is like the same or even better remote, because computer science is just one of those things where you don't really need to be in person. I really like the asynchronous nature of it as well. Sometimes, like if I have a half day where I'm at Shopify and a half day where I'm at Carleton, but maybe I'm really in the zone working on my whatever I'm working on, I can just go that full day. I don't actually have to go to university. I could just watch the lecture on another day when I was supposed to be working. And that's something we call flex time, where you can kind of, you put your hours in, you kind of set yourself up a schedule, but if you kind of shift around a few hours, that's fine. Like it's okay. And I think that's one of like the great things about working online. So yeah, I'm personally a fan of it. I don't know if that kind of answered the question or not.
Yeah, and I think the correct of that there is leaning into what makes remote work, which is the asynchronous stuff, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out the times that work good for you. And I know for me, the shift going to remote, because we used to work in the office, right? Has had me like re-examine what hours work for me in my day, right? And like I take a long lunch, I deserve it, and I'll put those hours in someplace else, right? Because like I have better energy in the morning, so I start a little earlier in my day, and I'm figuring out like my me time, which is actually really interesting. It's something that you don't get the opportunity to do a whole lot in a lot of other places, right?
And on the contrary, I hate mornings, so I set up my schedule to work 10 to 6, so I get to sleep in a little bit.
There you go.
That's how it is, and it works. And if we were in person, I just couldn't do that. Like I would have to wake up at like 7 to commute every day, and it's just like I can get an extra like 2-3 hours of sleep here. Like this is awesome.
I'm in the same boat. Except I pretend like I'm 9 to 5, but realistically, I push it out.
This is another good question, sort of coming up from the chat, maybe open to anybody. How do you keep up with updates coming out every day in this industry? General, computer science, web dev. How do you guys keep on top of the news?
I was just talking about this, but in terms of like updates, just because they're like Xcode just updated, and so in the mobile world, at least, I feel like I'm constantly updating my software and staying on top of things, which is very different than I feel like a lot of other companies are usually like, don't touch anything, it's working, don't touch anything. When we're always like pushing the boundaries and on top of things, like we're trying out technologies in ways that like they weren't always intended for. And so it's kind of fun, the stuff that we get to do at Shopify. And also we've I've worked alongside people who have worked on like or at companies that we now use as like their products and stuff. So we have expert knowledge, and like people like who used to sit next to me built the software that we're using to now like build our software. It's just crazy. But I've lost the track of my question. What was the question again?
How do you stay on top of the news, Britta?
I just try to take a little bit at a time. I find it can be overwhelming, definitely, but keep on top of updates and take in a little bit of time.
I think part of that is also like following your interests and finding that niche, you know, like computer science development, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what even is that? That's such a huge topic. Like what inside of that realm interests you? Find those people, like find a GitHub of a cool project, see who those people are, find them on Twitter, follow them, see what they're talking about. Like that's how you get to like the grassroots about like what's going on in some of these things, right? Or you just, you know, you read your Tech Radar or your Hacker News or whatever, and you get the general idea of things. But like the trick is really to find that, like, what are you interested in? And then find those key players and like see like what they talk about and what are they interested in? What are they building right now? And that's how you can sort of like start honing in on like what it is about computer science that's drawing you, right? Does anybody else have any interesting there? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tristan.
Follow-up one that maybe people can build on. 2 follow-ups. Feel free to choose. One is, do you have any recommendations for newsletters on staying on top of your news? And the other is, do the like developments in fintech and software, do those impact your role as a developer?
Does anybody follow newsletters?
I used to follow the Swift one, but now that I'm working in React Native, I've unsubscribed to it. But I do actually. There is a for React Native. There is a couple of YouTubers that I do follow. I really feel bad that I cannot think of this guy's last name, but his name is William. He sometimes actually works with us at Shopify, and he does a lot of stuff with React Native, and he is so good. He's coming in from, I think, Switzerland, and he's like, I love listening to his like, can you do this on React Native? Can we do that on React Native? And he also does like sometimes like these little like podcast things that I really get a lot out of. So that's where I've been, but it's been mostly because I've just changed tech stacks, in January. I find a lot more of my energy has been focused on that silo rather than more of like the other stuff, but it definitely changes, if that makes sense.
I feel like for me, I'm like vary across many different stacks. So I work back end, front end, sometimes a little bit of prod end. And it is a lot to keep up on. And I'm actually more of like a reactive person. So like being open to learning things is kind of what I like to think of it as like, okay, you come across this thing, you're like, I don't know what's going on in any ways whatsoever. Then I'm more of a reactive person and I'll go and research these things and learn about it and dig in. So it's a little bit of that, like, okay, when you're scared and you don't know what's going on, either find someone who does know what's going on or like learn about it in another way.
Yeah. And like the people are out there in terms of the, also another type of person to look for is like educators, like people that are putting out courses on whatever, you know, online course frameworks. Who are the people writing these courses? Follow them. Like I'm constantly following along with to like whatever Wes Bose is talking about, if it's front end, or Shopify has a good relationship with Sandy Metz, if it's other like Ruby stuff or anything. Like there's a lot of really powerful figures in those areas. Again, it's just about finding that niche that you're interested in, because if you're not interested in it, you're just going to bounce right off of it, right? So that's the big thing. Yeah.
If you do have any recommendations, feel free to drop them in the chat to share amongst all of the people who are here right now.
Yeah. Should we move on to the next questions?
Yes, let's do. There's an interesting one about the team placements that I would love to hear about. So this would be for probably Ashwin and Eric. How is the transition process between teams in terms of difficulty and the enjoyment of adapting?
I think that it's always a blast to jump around into different teams. It's really cool to jump around and to see like how different teams operate, how they work, and kind of adapting yourself to like how they work, and kind of bringing in new things from your previous placements into how they work. In terms of the transition process, I think that like when we go to like a new team placement, I just try to like set expectations of myself, and kind of have that between me and my mentor, and also me and my lead. And by setting those expectations, like it's a good like standing point. And it's it's pretty much it. And I really enjoy, I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed is just kind of challenging myself and kind of jumping into different areas of being like showing that willingness and being okay and being open with jumping into different areas, and made that like that idea of like maybe you don't know something and maybe learning from that. And that has made definitely like coming into placements with that kind of mindset has definitely helped me just be open-minded and learn a ton.
It's such an incredible opportunity to be able to jump around through teams like that, especially like it sounds like in your case when you're going into it completely open to the experience, because it can be daunting. But the amount that you get out of those different experiences it's crazy. I mean, Tyler, you touched on it. I've talked with a ton of leads who talk about the experience with Dev Degree and the context that they bring and the different experience that interns have.
Yeah, it's definitely like super scary to jump into these things, but the placements are like 4 to 8 months usually, and after month one, like usually the dev degree student is just another member of the team, and they're tackling like the same problems everyone else is tackling, and it's amazing to see people just dig into these things and solve them. It's if you come in with the learning mindset, like we need more people to help us build this thing. Like we're always short developers, so we're going to help you ramp up as fast as you can, so we have less work to do ourselves. Like it's kind of like a win-win for everyone. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that one?
It's definitely nice to build on context because you don't ever leave like with that, because you don't have to leave the company. You're just like building all that context up, and it's all going in that same spot, which is really nice. So it's like, yeah, no matter what part of the company you're in, you're not relearning the company, which you would have to do in a normal co-op program. You'd be switching like not only tech stacks and context, but like company information. And so it's nice that you can ramp up a little bit faster by staying in one spot. But I also had back end, front end, data, and then mobile before I was like, okay, mobile's where I want to be. So
super good point about just learning like company culture and how to navigate the place before you can really sink your teeth in. Okay, I got a couple other questions to get to before we get to the end of the night. This one we can go pretty general with. How is the balance between studying and work during Dev Degree?
I'd say sometimes it's a bit trickier. Especially during exam seasons, which I'm in right now. It does get tricky when you just have a lot to study. But obviously I can take vacation days, take time off. That's not a problem. Just chat with my lead, say, hey, I need some time. Most of the time it's not an issue. It's just kind of switching. And sometimes I am kind of like, I'd rather just be actually working now rather than doing stupid school, But it's not usually too much of an issue for me, but at times it can be hectic. Like maybe one weekend I'll have 3 things due, or I'll have like exams or something. And when that usually happens, I'll usually just take advantage of flex time, just like front load my work, like just work extra some time and then just focus more time later on school, or I'll take a vacation day or something like that. So it's never been a serious issue for me, considering I do have flexibility.
I think that the most important thing there is kind of like setting expectations and communication. Like that's the number one biggest thing. Just communicating with your mentor and lead, like when you're going to be in at work and when you're going to be at school and like what's going on at school. So I try to, like every week during my one-on-one with my lead, I try to have that conversation so that they're aware of what's going on with my life in school. And like also like once you started to as the semesters go on, and as you start to get further in your dev degree, kind of journey. Like you have like a routine set. You have like okay, on like these days I'm going to be at school, these days I'm going to be at work, and you kind of slowly find yourself like you're already adapted, you're all good to go. And yeah.
I do think it should be mentioned that you'll get really good at time management skills in dev degree because you're having to juggle a lot and context switch a lot. And you will hit a point, usually it's in third year university, where you realize it's okay to not hand in that one paper that's worth 5% because you'd rather have a good night's sleep to get more points done later on an exam, right? Like, so you do have to make that's part of time management, right? Is understanding what the priorities actually are and understanding what your trade-offs are. And don't, like, this is an intensive program, but don't go into it expecting that you're going to get everything done and get everything perfect. Like, it's all going to be perfect. And it's like, there's going to be times where you're going to have to make trade-offs.
Stay in school, kids.
No, I'm definitely saying,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And understanding what is important and what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done is a skill that, I mean, I'm still working on myself to figure out how to say no to things. What is really important here and what is just the loudest thing that is bugging me the most? Oh, you're totally right, but I just was laughing. Okay, we've got one question here. Sorry, Derek, did you have something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to mention too that like the one of the big thing there to keep in mind too is like once you get here into the program, you spend your first 8 months in our training path program, which is hopefully instilling and helping you build up a lot of those skills that you're going to need, those time management skills, those communication skills, so that when you get to your team, it's not such of a hard shift. There's still always going to be school, but like we do have things there to help get you where you need to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. I think we have time for one more. I've selected this one because I think it's an awesome question. I don't know if there's going to be any answers to it. Have you had any epiphanies with regards to programming while working at Shopify?
I love this question. I have an answer, but I'll let people think about it here.
I mean, there's definitely moments where you just like all of a sudden like click, it starts to make sense, and you start like, especially when you're changing tech stacks or changing like approaches. Like some programming languages are better suited for some styles of programming. So like I just, as I mentioned before, I was working in Swift, and I've moved over to React Native, and they have very different styles of programming. You build components very differently. You build, components. I'm saying it even like a React Native developer already, but there's just certain things that you do differently. And eventually you'll hit a point where you're just like, oh, that makes sense. Like, oh, that follows but I feel like that's not an exciting answer.
Pretty realistic though. That's pretty exciting. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, for me, it's like my professional development career has been at Shopify. So like I wrote spaghetti code for years. It was garbage. There was almost no object-oriented programming, but I learned how to be really scrappy in that code. But there was just like one day where I was like, oh, this is why we write things in classes, or like, and you're like, it was just this moment of like realization, and it's a really exciting feeling to have. But I don't think it's like solely applied to programming. It's like, oh, this is how like I get my PRs through faster and get people to review them better. Like you have these like moments all the time where you just like learn a new way to get things done, and that's like, I think that's what keeps me here, is that I'm just like constantly learning how to do things better. It's exciting.
There's also that classic thing where it's like the more you know, the more you know you don't know. Like you're just like, oh, there's a whole other, like I just opened a whole other minefield of like questions I have because I realized this one answer exploded into variety. Yeah, it's just like you just keep learning more paths that you didn't realize were there before.
I had also a pretty interesting epiphany when working on the training path. When we were in our React phase, one of the projects we do is we build a Shopify store and, well, a mock Shopify store. Like we kind of make something from scratch. I don't know if was supposed to say that or not, Derek, but it's out there now. And one of the things we were doing is populating products on the page. And then this was right as the pandemic hit. And I realized we could use this to get vaccine appointments and show where they are. So I started working on something, and I think I actually worked with Derek a few nights, just pairing with him, like, how do I do this exactly? Because I was very new to React, but I still used Polaris, which is Shopify's like front-end framework, and put it together and ended up creating something now that's been used by over 4 million people and is being deployed around the world, like completely open source. And that's an epiphany I had just on the training path. So I'd say that's a pretty cool one.
Definitely.
Hell yeah.
What's your epiphany? Or Ashfin, you got one?
Yeah, mine is like I usually have it like every now and then when I'm like when I'm working through something challenging or like a very challenging technical problem, and then I'm pairing with my mentor or lead, and it's like, whoa, this makes sense. Like this is why what I was thinking was maybe where I was getting blocked, and I was able to get like insight on how something was able to get to work, and how like a big epiphany for me was that like understanding like how the entire system worked, as opposed, and that helped me like understand the problem that I was working on.
That's awesome. I'll finish it off here. My epiphany came to me when I first started like looking at our code base here, coming from like programming other places and everything, and realizing that like less is not better when it comes to code. You know, I think as a computer science student, particularly in like your first couple of years, you're like, I'm going to write the smallest program ever. This is going to be like 10 lines. But the code's usually garbage because no one understands what's happening because they can't read your code because it's too fancy, right? So one of the things that happens here at Shopify is we lean into really verbose, readable code, and it's a joy to actually read and jump into different frameworks and different programs and different projects, even if it's a different language, because we have this mindset of like, hey, let's just make sure our code reads so that people can understand it when they look at it.
And not have to write a bunch of comments, because
right?
that's a common thing.
Yeah,
that we get
there's
taught
no comments in our code. There's like
that's...
no comments in our code. It's beautiful. Beautiful. That was my big thing.
It's always funny when people come from other places and then they have all this comment. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, just make the name better.
Yeah. It makes sense, right?
That's super cool. I didn't know that. Okay, awesome. That brings us to our time, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for participating in the chat. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, but hopefully you still learned something today about what it's like to be a developer and the things that you can do to get into the career. Thank you to all of our panelists for participating and letting us into a little bit of some of your secrets and experiences and sharing what those have been. It's invaluable when you're just getting started to know what people are going through and how they're thinking. I feel like sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, it's impossible to become a developer because they are beyond human at this point, and that is just not the case. And it's important to see exactly what their perspective is when you're that far into your career. So thank you, everyone. Definitely check out the DevDegree website. If you are interested in the DevDegree program, it's devdegree.ca. You can reach out to myself at info@devdegree.ca if you have some questions, and we'll do our best to get to those in a timely fashion over the holidays. But otherwise, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.